Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here. I'm going to read Chapter 3 of Fires of Prophecy, Book 2 in the Morcyth Saga. Recap: Michael's been captured. He's a slave, heading south to the slave markets of Khorasan. James and Jerome, Tanakh, Cassie, and Delia have just escaped the City of Light. Of course, James did his over-the-top magic again that he's known for, and pretty much almost detonated a nuclear bomb and wiped out almost everybody that was encamped outside the gates. Now, he does over-the-top magic because he has no finesse right now. You know, he's like a little kid with a hammer. He doesn't understand how hard to hit or how to use it properly. So he just does what he has to survive, and he makes mistakes, and there's always consequences. You know, in my book, there's always consequences. But let's get into it. Chapter 3. James awoke in the morning light. His head spun and ached as if 100 little hammers pounded away on it. He held his head until the pain subsided to a more tolerable level, then took in the surroundings. The others still slept, and 5 horses were picketed a little ways from the camp, still saddled for a quick getaway. A moment of panic set in when he couldn't locate his backpack. Then he realized he had been using it as a pillow. Opening it, he removed some food along with his water bottle. Deciding not to wake the others, he sat quietly and ate while he contemplated yesterday's events. The Empire's mage almost had me. I'm just a rookie compared to them. They've been doing this for a long time. My spells were ineffective. I'm going to have to work on better ones, make them more innovative to surprise them next time, or I'm toast. He remembered his last spell and smiled. I bet he never saw that coming. And that's true. Let me pause here for a moment. Why did they choose James? You know, why did they come to why did they come to Earth to recruit someone to do what needed to be done? You know, why was the whole ad placed on Earth? Well, we're technologists. We think of things in different ways, whereas the people of Jerome's world, you know, the mages, you know, about the only ones that are around are the ones in the School of the Arcane. They pretty much taken out all the other ones, and they've been taught certain way. But James comes from a technologist. He has science behind him. He understands more of how things work. So when he tries to work out spells, he's got a better understanding of the physical world, physics, you know, science and things like that, and that gives him an edge that the people here just can't have, especially when it comes to magic. Because I know I've said this before, but to me, magic is always a lot like electricity. You know, it's the discord between good and evil, right? They create this field of magic. So as long as there's good and evil on any world, there's going to be magic. And then based on how much good versus evil, evil versus good, is like the frequency of the magic. That's why when James went back to Earth, he couldn't do magic. Because A, the frequency was different, and B, he had been taught there was no magic. He knew down to his core that there was no magic on Earth, and that belief kept him from performing magic. So, and little things that have happened along the way enabled him to learn. Like in the last one, not the last one, this one coming up. I'll talk about it when I get there. Anyway, let's get back to this. A noise drew his attention, and he saw Cassie as he leaned up on one arm and looked. She saw Cassie as she leaned up on one arm and looked in his direction. He held up some of his food, silently offering it to her, but she just shook her head. She grabbed her pack and came to sit next to him. Taking food from her own pack, she asked, "Are you okay?" "Better," he replied, through a mouthful of food. "The more powerful the spell, the more it takes out of you. Sleeping last night helped quite a bit. After breakfast, I should be fine, if a little fatigued." "That's good. We were worried about you after you passed out." "It's what happens sometimes," he explained. "How long did we ride last night?" "Several hours, I think," she guessed. It seemed like a long time. Everyone was getting too tired to stay in the saddle, so we stopped and made camp. "We probably shouldn't stay here too much longer. The Empire will want to find us in a bad way." During their conversation, the others woke and joined them. "What was that thing you did last night?" Tanuk asked when he settled down next to him. "You mean the bubble?" "Yeah," he answered. "When it went off, it must have taken half their camp with it." "Really?" James asked, surprised. "I wasn't sure what was going to happen, to tell you the truth. I've never actually done that one before." "What happened?" He finished eating while Tanuk and the others related to him the events after he had passed out. When he reached the description of the explosion, James was quite astonished. "I designed the bubble to do two things. One was to absorb the power from any magic spells currently active in the area, and the other was a little more complicated. You see, when a mage casts a spell, he opens a conduit from his core of power, usually only enough to accomplish whatever spell he intends to do. My bubble grabbed the flow, pulled the power into itself, while at the same time preventing the mage from closing the conduit. The result was that the mage's power was sucked out of him and absorbed into the bubble. That must have been what was giving the bubble the light, the mage's power that it had absorbed. Now, here's the part I've never been able to really test before. What happens when the bubble is filled to capacity and reaches critical mass?" "Critical mass?" Dilly asked, confused. "What's that?" "Critical mass is when something is filled to its limit and ready to pop, for lack of a better term. In this instance, it could no longer hold the pressure, so it exploded. I would guess the size of the bubble and the amount of power it had absorbed would determine the intensity of the explosion." "You could wipe out an entire army with one of those," Tanuk exclaimed. Shaking his head, James said, "Not necessarily. After all, it would only work if there was a mage present. Also, if everyone ran away before it exploded, it wouldn't do too much harm." "I see your point. Now," Jerome interjected, "what are we going to do about rescuing my sister and your friends?" "First of all, where are we exactly? Which direction did we go when we left the city?" "We headed southwest," Jerome answered. "So it's safe to assume that we're currently in enemy territory," James concluded, "and will continue to be for some time." "Yeah," agreed Tanuk. "I propose we continue to head south and try to discover where the slavers intend to take them," he suggested. "Once we know that, we'll have a better idea of what to do." "Let's get going then," Jerome said, anxious to get started. James nodded. "I agree." Shouldering his backpack as he stood, he then went to one of the horses and swung into the saddle. His head spun from the exertion. Once it calmed, he scanned the surrounding countryside and was relieved to find nothing moving across the grassland except for the tall grass waving in the breeze. The southerly breeze felt good as the summer sun began to warm the day. He noticed Tanuk helped Delia into the saddle and that she favored her left leg. He walked his horse over and asked, "Are you okay?" "A stone hit me when the building exploded last night," she explained. "It hurts, but I don't think it's broken, just bruised." Feeling guilty at being the cause of her pain, he said, "I'm sorry." She smiled. "Hey, don't worry about it. We got out, didn't we? This is pretty minor compared to the fate I would have had if we hadn't." She patted him on the arm with her right hand. "So don't feel bad." "I don't, okay?" He smiled back and said, "Okay, I won't." I'm missing a period. That's better. Glancing around to see that everyone had already mounted and was ready to go, he turned his horse to the south and broke into a canter. The others followed. He took the lead with Jero next to him, the girls in the middle, and Tanuk eating their dust at the rear. After they traveled a ways, he asked Jerome, "Where did you and Tanuk learn to fight so well?" "The pits." "The pits?" "Yeah," he said. "They're not altogether legal, but many of the wealthy pay to have people fight one another with weapons for their amusement. It pays pretty well, but you usually don't survive long." I always did the knives, so did Tanakh. We both rose up through the ranks quickly. We have a knack for this sort of thing. We never were set against each other and were able to become friends. Friendship with another in the pits is rare, because often you have to face them, so many don't even bother. But we get along well, even though we knew a day would come when we would be set against one another. Then the day came when we were set to face off. You never know who you'll be fighting until your name is called. When our names were called, we both marched out of the pit, and by this time, our friendship had grown very strong. We could see that the other's heart was not in this. When the order was given, Tanakh opened himself up to me, didn't even try to defend himself. He was willing to sacrifice himself rather than strike me. The crowd was not happy. They had come to see blood spilled. They began calling for me to kill him, but I couldn't. I came and stood next to him and said to the gathered people, "We will not fight each other." You can imagine what happened next. They sent in the bruisers, the ones who deal with problems in the pits. 2 came in wielding clubs. We stood our ground, and in no time at all, they were dead at our feet. We stood defiant before the crowd, side by side. Next, they brought in 2 armored guards with swords, and to the shock of everyone there, they soon lay dead at our feet too. After that, the crowd began to realize what they were seeing and started applauding us. 2 upstarts who wouldn't play their game ended up playing their game better than anyone. He broke out into a laugh. So, from then on, they either paired us or we fought singly against others. They would send 2, 3, sometimes 4 against us at a time, but none could match us. Incredible, James said. Yeah, agreed Jerome, it was. What made you start in the first place? My sister and I used to live on the streets. One day, a man came to me and told me about the pits and that he thought I might have some talent at it. He offered me a silver if I came and sparred with him. I did, and found I did have some talent for it. I'm pretty good with any weapon, as it turns out, but with the knives, I'm very deadly. The man trained me for 6 months, and then I had my first fight. They put me against another knifer, and I took him relatively fast and received coins for winning. After several fights, I was able to get a small place where my sister and I could live, a place she would be safe until she could find a good man. She never wanted me fighting, but you gotta do what it takes to survive. I can understand that. From behind them, Cassie interrupted and asked, "Do you think they're going to follow us?" Now, I'll pause here again. Later on, I'm pretty sure, but I can't recall exactly where I said this. But the guy that found Jerome was Igor. I'm almost positive I put that in there somewhere. Why? Because he was creating the trail of the gods for James to follow. And in order to have if you're a worker, if you're going to hire someone to do a job, you got to give him the tools that will allow him to do the job. So Igor found Jerome, saw what he could become, and made him. So James would have a comrade to help him through it. I mean, Tanakh coming along was just gravy, really. But yeah. But Jerome, being a knifer, was part of the Trail of the Gods. I don't know if I said that before. I'm almost positive I said it in a later book. Maybe Travail, maybe? I don't know. But I didn't mention Igor by name. I believe there was like one paragraph somewhere where Jerome commented about the guy who found him and trained him, and talked about his vest and the hat, right? And though he looked human, because Igor can obviously change his appearance to people, it was Igor. All right. James turned in his saddle and said, "Most assuredly, it's only a matter of time. I'm just hoping they won't think that we're escaping into their territory. Most likely they'll think we've already headed north or west toward the Silver Mountains and Cardry. That's where I would think to look if I was them. I doubt if anyone will remember which way we were headed. They were a little preoccupied at the time." Next to him, Jerome broke out into a laugh and nodded. They rode for another hour before a town appeared on the horizon. They kept an eye out for movement, but the place appeared abandoned. As they approached, they saw why. Fire-gutted buildings stood empty, with dead bodies scattered throughout the area. A road passed through the center of town, heading east to west. "Do you think the Empire did this?" Cassie asked as they stopped well away from the town. James said over his shoulder. I don't like that. James glanced back over his shoulder and said, that sounds better. James glanced back over his shoulder and said, most likely they did it on their way to the city. Shall we see if anyone is alive? Julie asked. I think anyone who survived this would have gotten away before now, James replied. Besides, we can't take the chance that we'll be discovered. But someone could need our help, she insisted as she pointed to the town. Sometimes, he began to explain, you have to think of... She gave him a dirty look and kicked her horse, galloping toward the town before he had a chance to finish. Damn! Jerome exclaimed as he raced after her. Tanika and Cassie followed, attempting to catch up with Jerome and Delia. James sighed and nudged his horse into motion. He followed at a slower pace, keeping an eye out for movement on the horizon. Are you crazy? Jerome yelled at Delia when he caught up with her. Coming to the first bodies, she came to a stop and dismounted. Upon reaching where the first bodies laid, okay, how about this? Upon reaching where the first bodies laid, she came to a stop and dismounted. One by one, she checked them to see if any still lived. Not paying Jerome any attention, she moved on to the next. He dismounted and went over to her, grabbed her by the arm, and turned her to face him. We cannot stay here. The Empire will use this road, and it's only a matter of time before they arrive. Staring him in the eye, she said, Let go of my arm, and continued staring him down until he did. If time is of the essence, then help me. I am not leaving until I know there is no one here to help. She turned her back on him and continued to the next person. James rode up and said, We have got to get out of here. Jerome spat on the ground. She won't leave until she's sure there's no one to help. Damn, James cursed, and then looked up and down the road, making sure no one approached. All right, everyone fan out and search for survivors. Cassie, keep a lookout, and if anyone comes from either direction, you let us know fast. She nodded, and they found a position where she could keep both directions in view. The others moved from body to body, but only found corpses. Jerome searched the buildings, but again, no survivors were found. Someone's coming! Cassie yelled as she hurried back. Where? Jerome and James yelled simultaneously. He pointed toward the west. There. James looked and asked, Do you see how many? More than one, she replied. I felt you needed to know as soon as possible, so didn't stop to count them. Delia! James hollered. When he had her attention, he pointed to the west. We've got company! She saw the riders coming and ran over to join the others. To join them. That sounds better. Tanek had already gathered the horses, and they brought them into one of the larger buildings. James and Jerome took positions by the window and watched. The others held the horses, trying to keep them as quiet as possible. It wasn't long before they heard the riders approach. James watched as perhaps a score made their way through the center of town, passing directly in front of where they hid. The dead? Seems wrong, one said. The man spoke with the accent and from the Empire. We don't have time to take care of it now, another replied in the same accent. As the riders passed, one glanced toward the window from where James and the others looked out. That sounds better. Just one second, I guess. I can't do anything without editing. Ducking to the sides, James and Jerome quickly moved out of view. The man must not have seen them, for he turned back and continued on. 20 riders in all passed by on their way through town. They waited for several minutes, allowing the riders to move farther down the road before they exited the building. James peeked out and saw that the riders were already out of sight. The road being empty, he turned to Delia. Can we leave now? I'm sorry for putting us in jeopardy, she said guiltily. I couldn't leave without knowing. We understand, Jerome said, but think before you act next time. Our lives may depend on it. Okay? All right, Delia said. They brought the horses from the building and remounted. Then, with James in the lead, they headed south out of town, making their way into the grasslands. Several times during the afternoon, they had to detour when riders appeared in the distance. Each time, they were certain they would be discovered, yet each time, the riders continued on until they were again out of sight. When the sun dipped toward the horizon, they were still out in the middle of the grasslands. They decided to make camp, foregoing a fiver in favor of not alerting the countryside to their presence. They ate before the sun set completely and picketed the horses close by their camp, again leaving the saddles on in case they needed to leave quickly. Not good for the horses, but necessity given the circumstances. Necessary given the circumstances. Do you think we're catching them? Cassie asked while they ate. Who? James responded. The slavers? Yes. I would think so. They have lots of people walking while we're riding. Even though we are taking a more roundabout way, we have to be gaining. When twilight came, they settled in to sleep. James stared up at the sky as it darkened into full night. James, you heard Dilla say, yeah? Where are you from? A long ways from here, and probably won't be able to return for quite a while, he replied. Why? Well, actually, he could be he could have come from far, far away. Galaxy far, far away, right? Just curious is all. Are everyone there mages? Cassie asked. No, there are none, actually, he said. I may be the first. You're the first one I've ever met. Do I live up to your expectations? He asked, amused. No, she said. You're nice. James laughed and sobered up and asked, are all mages mean? Tanakh said, most people believe them to be. All you ever hear about is how mages ruin things and hurt people. Seeing what you've already done, it's not hard to understand why that is. It's all perspective, James said. I doubt most tales that speak of how mages help others wouldn't be believed, and only the interesting ones are told again and again. Those tend to be the ones where they are not very nice. I suppose you're right, he concluded. Maybe we should all be thinking about going to sleep. Jerome's voice cut through the night. We have lots of ground to cover and people to find. You're right, James agreed. Turning over, he tried to find a comfortable spot. I hate sleeping on the ground. Eventually, he was able to drift off to sleep. Oh, I do too. I hate sleeping on the ground. And in fact, now that I'm in my upper 50s, I probably couldn't get back up again. I slept on the ground all night. The morning dawned beautifully, and James woke stiff and aching due to another night spent on the hard ground. He stretched, trying to work out the kinks. It didn't take long before the rest were up, breakfasted, and ready to ride. Once mounted, they continued south, hoping to discover where the slavers were headed. James took out his compass and located Miko's general direction. The needle swung to the southeast. We're gaining on them, he thought to himself. Putting his compass away, he felt much better about the possibility of a rescue. Just hang on, Miko. They didn't travel much farther before a man appeared from the east. He was on foot, and two riders were in hot pursuit. We must help him, Delia cried. Jerome and Tanakh glanced at one another, and with a whoop and holler, kicked their horses into a gallop. James and the girls followed at a safer pace, keeping an eye to the east. One rider aimed a crossbow at the fleeing man. The man's pace faltered as he was struck. Stumbling, he lost his balance and hit the ground. The riders, so intent on the man they were chasing, failed to notice Jerome and Tanakh until they were practically upon them. Riding straight for them, Jerome and Tanakh jumped from their horses, and each grabbed one of the men, dragging them to the ground. When they hit, they rolled and came to their feet quickly. And let's move that. They rolled and quickly got to their feet. Knife blades flashed in the sun. The two riders got to their feet quickly. I can't say got to their feet quickly twice, right? I just can't do it. The two riders. The two riders were soon. The two riders got up and drew their swords as the two young men advanced upon them. Jiren diverted a thrust of the man's sword with one knife and struck with his other. It sank into the man's side, and Jiren kicked him off the blade. Tanakh's opponent wielded a sword in one hand and a knife in the other and was pressing Tanakh backward. Tanakh saw from the corner of his eye that Jerome's man was down and quickly launched a series of fast attacks. The pattern made his opponent defend, and through precisely timed and aimed blows, caused him to leave a spot open where Tanakh struck. blade sinking into his chest, the man stumbled and began coughing up blood. Falling to his knees, he gagged, unable to breathe. He fell to the ground, dead. Took you long enough, Jerome said to Tanuk as he wiped his blade on the dead man's clothes. Tanuk just looked at him and they both started laughing. They're kind of callous about killing people, aren't they? But I guess in that society where probably you go to a tavern and someone ends up dead almost daily, and having gone in the pits, they probably don't think too much about it. If someone attacks you, take them out. Cassie, by this time, had made it to the man whom the riders had chased. The crossbow bolt must have struck an artery in his leg, for the blood quickly flowed from the wound. I use quickly way too much. The blood flowed freely from the wound. James came over, saw the amount of blood. When Cassie looked at him, he shook his head, indicating there was nothing they could do. Thank you, the man said. Cassie asked kindly, for what? For letting me die a free man. He was dressed in just a loincloth, the garb of a slave. Were you part of those captured when the City of Light fell? James asked. We're seeking friends that were taken. It fell? The man asked incredulously. Bad news indeed. The man spasmed and got a glazed look at his eye, and his voice grew weaker. They'll probably be taken to Khorasan, to the slave markets. That's where I overheard the slavers say we were being taken before I escaped. Khorasan? James Jerome asked intently. Where is it? Don't know, the man said weakly. Somewhere to the south, I think. The man took one last breath, and then death claimed him. Poor man, Delia said sadly. At least he didn't die a slave, Jerome asserted. We should bury him before we go. I agree, Cassie said. She got to her feet and looked around until she found a rock. Then she began scraping out a grave. The others found rocks and sticks, and before too long had dug a suitable grave. Jerome and Tanuk carried the man to it and laid him respectfully within. They covered him with dirt, and when done, mounted and continued on. Khorasan, James said after they got going. Anyone heard of it? No, Delia replied. The others just shook their heads. It must be within the Empire, he guessed. At least we now have a destination. How do you know if they are actually being taken there? Cassie asked. Don't, James replied. That's all we have to go on. The rest nodded in agreement. They kept a brisk pace throughout the day, eating in the saddle to save time. A couple more times before nightfall, they saw riders off to the east, angling more to the west each time to avoid being seen. They found themselves gradually being pushed more and more westward. By the time night approached, the Silver Mountains were visible off in the distance. Didn't realize we had headed so far west, James said when they stopped for the evening. What do you mean? Jerome asked. He pointed toward the sunset and the mountains. Those are the Silver Mountains. They run the length of the border between Cardri and Matic. Are we moving away from Khorasan? Cassie asked. Can't say, he explains, since we have no idea exactly where it is. Oh, right, she said, a little embarrassed. But I would think that the farther we are to the west, the less of the Empire's soldiers we will encounter, he reasoned. Of course, that assumes that the Empire and Cardri haven't gone to war yet. Think they have? Doubt it, he assured her. The Empire probably has all it can handle with Matic right now. I hope so, she said, and they settled in for the night. So that ends chapter 3. Delia, I understand her needs and desire to help people, but she needs to moderate that with safety for them, because they're in enemy territory. They just can't be running ahead into towns because you just never know what you're going to face there. And at this point, did I have a plan for what Delia was going to happen, or what would happen to Cassie? No, I was just writing it. I had very little in the way of an idea of where I was going with the story at this point. All I knew, because when I first started the Morcyth Saga, I had 10 books planned out. And the first book, the episode I made, I had in great detail, big outline written. And as I started writing it, at about the third chapter, I realized there's no way I can adhere to the outline, so I threw it out. Now what I do is I have certain points that I do. Like in this book, they started in the City of Light, and then I knew they were going to go to Khorasan. I knew that, and then I knew the slave mines. I had that in my head at the time, that would be a good destination, and they would likely take Michael, a young, he's young, and so he would be able to, do well there, and last a long time because he's got the vitality of youth. So that's really all I had to plan. Everything else I just made up on the fly. Yeah, and I really love the way Delia turned out. She was my really first strong female character. Although when Alea comes by, I love Alea. She's the best. But anyway, chapter 4. Okay, personal stuff. My brother's coming today. He'll be here in probably about 4 hours or so, and we're not that close. We hardly talk. We never exchange cards. We never talk to each other on the phone. We don't text each other. We don't send each other emails. About the only time we really talk is when he comes to visit our mom. But I kind of feel bad about that sometimes, but I don't seem to feel so bad that I don't take steps to improve it. And I know that when the time comes when he passes away, if he goes before me, I'll really regret it. But I don't seem to be able to have a desire to change that. It's not that I don't like him. It's just that we just never have. When he left high school, he never wants to. When he's 4.5 years my senior, and so when he left home, he never once contacted me. He never once wrote me. He never once did anything. And I guess we just kind of settled into that and became a habit, and now that's just the way it is. About the only contact we really have is he's one of the 2 editors of my books, right? I'll send him chapters and he'll send stuff back. And he says he loves my books. And he tells everybody about it. Anyway, I love my brother. And I don't dislike him. We just really we've just never been close. My girlfriend finds that just totally unbelievable because she's got a sister and a brother, and they're very close. They talk all the time. Well, we just never did, and I can't tell you why. We just never did. So he'll come. We'll play canasta. We'll eat out way too much. I'll probably gain 10 pounds. And summer is my weight loss time. My weight loss has been, I haven't gained. I think I might be down 2 pounds, but I should be down about 14 by this point. But there's been so much rain, I haven't been able to. But as long as next April, say April 1st is my schedule. As long as when April 1st hits, as long as my weight on that day is less than the previous year, I'll be satisfied. This last April 1st, I was 20 pounds down versus, for 2024, April 1st, 2024, I was 20 pounds down from April 1st, 2023. And I'd like to continue that for the next 4 years. We'll see what happens. I know I'll be down a little bit. But see, I lose weight in the summertime, I gain it back in the wintertime. I just have to I lose 30, gain 10 back. That tends to be my schedule. Anyway, chapter 4 tomorrow. Even if my brother's here, it won't stop me from doing this. I do it really early in the day, and I don't think they'll pay much attention to me. So tomorrow, chapter 4. You all take care.